Welcome to the Coast to Coast podcast, brought to you by Play Picks and the Lines. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at two games here on a Monday night slate in the NBA playoffs. We've got in the Western Conference, we've got the Mavs taking on the Suns in game one here in Phoenix. And we are going to kick things off actually with the Eastern Conference game as the Philly 76ers head to Miami, taking on that one seed in the Miami Heat, who will be without Kyle Lowry. But we are going to take a look at what we like in this game, some player props as well. Make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Continue to follow along with us as we bring you each and every playoff game, as well as these player props that we'll look to continue when we do have enough to bring them to you. And as always, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, head to ftpicks.com or dkpicks.com. Find those listings in your area, such as what we've got for tonight. Nate, let's get into it.
Game one at Miami, and Joel Embiid is going to miss both of these first two games. Big news. So the Sixers open as plus 7.5, the total at just 208.5 after they erupted for 132 to close out the Raptors. Series odds, the Sixers are plus 270. That seems like not great odds with given the status of Embiid. Miami is minus 140 to close in 6 or fewer games. And interesting, I mean, if you're going to take the Sixers at plus 270, Heat to win game one, Sixers to win the series after that is plus 500. Seems like you might as well go that route with the big fella out, although maybe they split, maybe they steal this one. Which brings us to game one, of course. And you know how we feel at this point is stars out and the bet's up. I mean, at plus 7.5, I feel much more comfortable hoping for a closer game or for Philly to really just play above their pay grade because their guys are out. I mean, we're seeing this across the league. We saw it with the Mavs, with the Bucks today against the Celtics when Chris Middleton's out. Guys rallying because a key player is out and showing that they just having an extra gear, an extra focus because of that. In their last three without Embiid, the Sixers were able to win all those games because Tyrese Maxey, 29 points per game, 5 assists per game, a 132 offensive rating. Those games, I am kind of intrigued about a little bit more scoring, a little bit more pace without Embiid. Now in their last 5 without him, 97.5 pace, whereas you look at in this series with the Raptors, the pace was near 90, especially down the stretch in the fourth quarter when they're trying to preserve Embiid, play through him. I think it'll be a much more free-flowing game. The Sixers know they're going to have to play that way because now what are their weapons? It's Harden, Maxey, three-point shooting, which is the key against Miami. Just like the Bucks, they will dare you to make threes. Philadelphia is not a good three-point shooting team. There's a few notes here that's going to be troublesome for Philly, including, the fact that they got so many of their points on the fast break against Toronto, and Miami allowed 7 fast break points per game in their last series. Miami allowed the second fewest paint points as well in that series. Bam doing an incredible job down low, and he's done a pretty good job in Embiid, and now he doesn't have to deal with him. So the Heat are not without their own issues here. Kyle Lowry out. They're listing 6 other players as questionable. I don't think anybody's actually going to miss this game one, but shows you that they're a little banged up and makes you feel a little concerned about them just rolling to a win here against the Sixers team that, really kind of pulled itself out of the crevasse in terms of being like, oh my God, this thing is spiraling out of control. We're going to blow that 3-0 lead. And then a barrage of Tyrese Maxey threes. Later, it was all front running James Harden team. And when a James Harden team starts to roll, it's all momentum. I mean, if he's getting downhill, if he's playing with energy, getting everyone involved. Look, the point is that game 6 eruption, it wasn't all about Joel Embiid, not really at all. In fact, he was still hurt. He's still dealing with that thumb ligament. I mean, he put up his numbers, but it was really about Harden and Maxey pushing the pace. Harris playing well off Embiid, of course. But I still think that the Sixers are capable of hanging around in this game with or without Embiid. And so that's where I would start there with that big spread.
Yeah, I don't love betting this total. We'll talk about that Western Conference game, and I'll actually feel pretty strongly about that total. This one, I don't. I would definitely lean under. I mean, the only thing that keeps me, from feeling strongly like I want to put some money on that is what you're saying. It's the free flowing nature of this game without Joel Embiid. It's James Harden looking for assists for shooters. It's guys like Tobias Harris playing a bit better because of a spread floor and his ability to then ISO guys that are smaller than him if he's able to get into those situations. At the same time, without Embiid this season, it's pretty obvious that they're not as good of a team. Shockingly, when the second best, most likely guy to get MVP right now is out. His usage rate was number one, was tops in the league, 37.5%. 34 minutes a game in that with that high usage. They obviously score about 5 points less. They give up about 4 points more. They actually shoot worse. They score 2 less threes. Obviously that in and out game is not there now with Embiid out. George Niang going to have to play a bit more. And actually be out on the perimeter himself. But, it's a little bit easier to cover all on the perimeter rather than having to go in and out like they do when Embiid's on the floor. But yeah, it's a Tyrese Maxey game for sure. And he's still only at 22.5 points. And in this last game without Embiid or Harden that they played against the Heat in March, he went off for 28, 5, and 6, was shooting really, really well from all over the floor, including 7 of 7 from the free throw line. So, he's attacking. Him to be leading scorer in this game is a good bet, as you've written out here, plus 340 on DraftKings. I would also consider 25 points, 6 boards, 6 assists on a DraftKings special for plus 2,200 for Maxey. I do think 25 points is very likely for him, and considering the amount that he's going to be playing at 38 minutes to 40 minutes in this game at least, it's now crunch time for them. And there's not much else for them right now. Obviously, they're a much thinner team than they were around the perimeter when they had other guys, obviously like Seth Curry out there and a few more 3-point shooters. So, look, Paul Reed's actually going to come in and get some time now with Embiid out, but I think you're still going to see a lot of that smaller ball lineup with Tobias Harris, maybe, and then insert Danny Green, George Niang, however you want to play with them. And that should open things up a bit for Maxey, and they will play a bit faster. And once again, that's why I'm staying away from that total in game one. I really want to see how this game flows. But the thing too with the total when it comes to the Heat is, how are they going to shoot? How are Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero going to play? They were pretty much, in my estimation, the reason that they lost that last game without Harden and Embiid playing against them. When the two of them combined for 2 of 9 for 3, 7 of 21 from the field. They combined for 16 points between the two of them. Just not good enough, especially with Kyle Lowry out, who, they only put up 106, and Kyle Lowry had 20 points in that game. I don't know where their offense is going to come from. Max Strus is questionable. I think a lot of these guys are going to play. I think the only one, obviously, that's out right now is Lowry, who's already been listed as such. But I think really what we're looking at here is there's not going to be much in terms of resistance for the Miami Heat right now with this 76ers defense. It was not necessarily a poor showing against a Raptors team who just doesn't really have, who was, in the bottom half of the league in terms of half court offense, which is exactly what you're looking for in the playoffs now. And yeah, I mean, Miami's half court offense is a bit better if they're making their 3-pointers, which is why it's too much of a wild card for me. Philly did get much better at defending the 3-pointer towards the end of the season. They ended 9th best in terms of their opponent 3-point percentage. So I think 7.5 is too much, and that's where I start as well. I just wish those series odds were a little bit better with Joel out, because I do think the Philly's capable of winning this series if Embiid comes back in game 3 or 4. But I still think that plus 270 is not enough for me to feel good enough about it with the Heat with home court and pretty much at full strength, despite some guys still with some nagging things going on.
Yeah, no thanks. I mean, I wouldn't really take that even if Embiid was healthy, personally. But there's 2 things that stick out to me about this game. Yeah, and you kind of reminded me, the Heat, yeah, how volatile their offense has been. And in the first half, I would target their under. It's 55.5. The under is minus 104 at FanDuel. They're averaging 55.5 against a Clint Capella-less Atlanta Hawks team. And you want to tell me which team is worse defensively? I mean, the Sixers will have Tybal out there, Tobias Harris, Maxey has energy. Paul Reed is not a bad backup center, as you mentioned. And this game, yeah, I mean, we see all sorts of playoff series start with a little bit of knockdown, feel out, slow pace for sure. And if they're not hitting, then yeah, they could go way under that 55.5. are at least slightly under. And then the other thing is just that Miami, they have lulls in concentration. Even when they're up big, they tend to kind of lapse and let the other team get back in the game, because in that Atlanta series, they had a 130 defensive rating in the fourth quarter. And that was a lot of garbage time, but it could result in, if you're live betting it, certainly the Sixers closing the gap. I mean, what if they get down pretty big, but then you can get plus 11 in the middle of the game, and they close that gap in garbage time in the fourth quarter. I'm not necessarily saying that's likely. Look, Miami was slightly under 500 against the spread as a home favorite. They were 24-11 straight up, but not great against the spread. Both these teams have done really well with long rest, so that is something to look at. I'm definitely not expecting the Sixers to win. The Heat are 17-3 straight up when they have at least 2 days of rest this season. So all those Knicks and Knicks, all those guys who are questionable, that'll give them a little extra time to heal. And I think they should close this game with a little more concentration than they had against Atlanta, but I wouldn't expect a double-digit win, which is basically what we're talking about with the spread.
Right. Yeah. And for that double-digit win to happen, I still think we're talking about, the Heat needing to get up to about 110. And I just don't think they do it. I mean, when you look at Bam as well, when he's played against this team and really what he's played like the last half of the season, he's not scoring very much. And he's not really, he's really playing that point center to a T, honestly. And, I do like he and Butler and their ability to get into the paint without Embiid, in there. The last game they did play without him, Bam did score 81% of his points from the paint. So it's really about, but it was also a complete lack of 3-point shooting and anything working outside of Bam in that game, who did do a pretty good number on Paul Reed, but there was also some Paul Millsap minutes in there that he was going up against. So it's not going to be the exact same team that he was playing in that last game. I would actually not, stay away from all those props. I think you can continue to feel good about Jimmy. That's the one where, especially without Embiid in the game, I mean, his 24.5 points, it feels high for Jimmy this season based on this, as you mentioned, the volatility in terms of how many points he was scoring. But I think it's playoff Jimmy time. And that's what we saw in round one was Jimmy coming with the points, right, averaging nearly 30 points per game in that series at 24.5. And a huge reason for that, which we talked about multiples of times, was Clint Capella not being there and there just being nobody else, especially with John Collins still coming back from injury, just really not being anybody else you trust. Okongwu's not the guy for the Hawks right now in terms of his defensive ability, especially with the way he showed it in that series. Well, it's the same concept here. I think Jimmy and Bam, they're not necessarily going to be walking into the paint the way they were without Capella or really a healthy John Collins, but they will be fine to get there. And I think Jimmy's the one who continues to benefit from that. And you continue to feel good about Bam's stats a little bit differently. The rebounds and assists are what he's going to continue to get, averaging about 12 and 6 against the Heat in his last 4 against them. So you feel pretty good about his stats in those areas rather than the points, I would say, which once again makes you feel pretty good about an under.